Hello, everyone. This is Ron Gerber from Angel Beat, bringing you more insights from Steve Woodard, one of the top enterprise solution architects, a big technology guru down there in Florida with Amazon Web Services. One of the things that we've seen over the past 4 to 6 weeks is an exponential increase, if that could be possible, in the number of organizations migrating to the cloud. In today's challenging coronavirus world, the increased demand for less reliance on on-premise computing has only gotten more dramatic. And one of the ancillary concerns that many organizations have is what happens when we move to the cloud? Are we going to be suddenly hit with all these extravagant bills because we're reacting so abruptly in changing our computing strategy? So what I wanted to do is ask Steve to address this issue, because in many cases, even as everyone's working at light speed, you're able to still save a tremendous amount of money, even as you balance OpEx versus CapEx. And in doing so, even if the coronavirus is pushing all of us to move even faster, you'll also find that you get a lot of advantages in terms of accelerating digital transformation. So I think net-net, you'll end up saving money. And let me turn it over now to Steve, as he can take you through more in-depth examples of what his clients are doing so they can embrace digital transformation, save money, avoid having to make all these big capital expenditures, and still save money on their operating expenses. All yours, Steve.
Thanks, Ron. I really appreciate that. And thanks for the great introduction. So really, I want to talk about is a way that we can look at kind of this post-COVID world that we're living in, and really talk about how do we start to look at cost optimization and what are some components that we have that we could work with in this type of environment that we're now working in, where we start to see a huge demand on resources and kind of stretching those resources to an absolute point where we need to start looking at cost as a real world issue. So I'm going to dive in a little bit here, and we talk about introduction, and this is really going to be at a very high level. And really what I want to talk about are some of the challenges that customers see when they move into kind of like this kind of hybrid journey. I'm going to talk about the 5 pillars of our cost optimization. I'm going to walk through a customer journey just kind of as an example. And then when we get down to the very end, we'll talk about how do I right-size my environment and how do I balance that with cost visibility. And a couple of the challenges where we've had on-prem is we lack the ability to really get really useful insights from what our true cost to serve a particular application is. So I'm going to move into a customer challenge here, and some of the questions that I sometimes hear from customers are things like, how do I reduce my cost for lower environments, my development environment, QA environments, or even production? What options are available to me that I can help bring that cost down? And then another thing is can technical account managers help in that cost optimization activity? And this is a real combined effort between customer engagement, solution architects, and technical account managers that can really help drive customers' cost reduction when we come into kind of our well-architected review. Now, when we talk about an AWS approach, what really is our different is that AWS's approach is we're customer obsessed when it comes to cost optimization. And AWS has reduced cost over 70 times by reducing those prices, and we even produce tools and solutions for customers to monitor and even analyze their total spend for tools like things like Trusted Advisor. You can use things like Cost Explorer, and you really now get a chance to get real valuable insights into your environment and really start to see what environments truly cost. And then you can even use those as good indicators to see how you're trending over a monthly and even quarterly trajectory. So these are some tools that I'm going to go through. Just want to kind of whet your appetite a little bit. When we get into our well-architected or well-architected review, we talk about the 5 pillars of cost optimization. And I'm going to just go through these at a very high level, and then I'm going to go through each one individually. So we talk about things such as right-sizing your instances. As solution architects, we want to be able to help look at customers' environments and help them identify what workloads are ideal for their specific environments. Another question comes into is how do I increase elasticity without having to change the overall architecture design of my environment? How do I pick the right pricing model? And this is a challenge where some customers are, do I go on demand? Do I go reserved? Do I do spot? We'll go into those a little bit more in detail. And then how do I match those usages to basically match that storage use or basically that storage cost with those specific environments? And then when we look at this, this is our total operating or basically our total mechanisms for optimization or optimization. So the first thing is when we talk about right sizing is we want to get the best instance with the best performance at the cheapest price. So really it's about right sizing the environment. And when we look at things such as understanding your utilization, understanding your baseline, understanding what your application does over a period of about 13 months helps you really get insights as to kind of how much resources you need. So looking at things like CPU, RAM, storage, and network utilization are all used to help identify instances that could be downsized. And what we see a lot of times is customers are over provisioned. So they're actually using larger instances, larger machines coming from an on-prem environment into the cloud. They don't need all of that CPU and RAM, is that they can really start to really right size those environments to better match their utilization. And another example of this is if we were to look at a right sizing example, if we look at how we basically migrate, provision, and run, we would look at the network, or we'd look at the CPU and RAM. We'd look at all of those utilization reports to really get a picture of how that application is performing over a period of a couple of months, preferably around 12 to 13 months. And then we right size that. So we really match the workload to the specific instance. So here in this example, we're talking about an M4 extra 4X large. And here we're basically running this at about 10 cents per hour. And then we actually then, once we right size it, then we can start to look at cloud utilization, or we can look at monitoring tools that allow us to start viewing that performance and see what exactly is happening over a period of time. So that way we can either increase or decrease that instance. And the great thing about the cloud is that now you can do everything with API calls. So within just a couple of API calls, you can actually change that instance type to move up or down in your instance sizes. And the benefit to that is that when you're able to then basically start to right size your environment is we start to see customers start hitting that number. We start to see 87% savings year over year on those environments because they're no longer locked into those on-prem models where when you purchase hardware, you deploy your applications and the applications are going to run on that hardware and that hardware tends to be over provisioned. Here you can basically get rid of that. You can now start to really save by using the elasticity and the availability of the cloud. So we talk about increasing elasticity. We talk about a feature like auto-scaling as we talk about being able to meet and those unexpected peaks in traffic when we start to say, you know, during a specific time of year, we have this typical trend upwards in our application or our utilization. We want to be able to scale to meet that demand. And how we do that is a feature called auto-scaling. And I'll walk you through here a little bit what that means. And that really just kind of basically allows us to basically match our unused capacity versus kind of using it or basically matching it with overcapacity. And the traditional IT approaches have been on-prem is that most of the entire environment is going to basically be sitting or unused or idle during that given year. And then basically over a period of time, so you think of something like Amazon.com, how basically when we have that Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that uptick in traffic, that starts to scale. And we use a feature like auto-scaling to give us the ability to start to scale. And that capacity management and capacity planning piece tends to be an area where we really tend to guess. So when on-prem, when we talk about capacity management, capacity planning, we're really trying to guess. No, we don't have to guess anymore. We now could use things like auto-scaling to basically scale out or scale up or scale down those environments. So that way we're no longer spending money on unused capacity. So we're talking about some of the benefits of basically auto-scaling, and auto-scaling is really just a free service that allows you to basically right-size those workloads so that they can basically be sized dynamically around the capacity over a given period of time. And this really just helps you with basically reducing the cost due to over provisioning, and it really just allows you to scale up when you know that you have an anticipated growth, or you just simply don't know when it's going to happen, you can always basically just use AutoScaling for those unexpected peaks in traffic. Another pillar we're talking about leveraging the right pricing model. So customers tend to typically ask the question, in my environment, where do I typically fall? I could go with reserved instances, I can use Spot, or I could even go on demand. And most workloads are going to basically tend to be on-demand workloads, meaning that you pay for what you use at the moment and any time. And there's a couple of different other pricing constructs that give you a little bit more discounts on how well you know your environment. But we're really going to just briefly cover reserved instances and Spot. But you can get a deeper dive into two mechanisms in their own in one of our optimization workshops. So we talk about RIs. What are RIs? These are reserved instances, and these are just simply discounts applied to your instances based on a long-term commitment. This basically assumes that you know what your specific application is going to be over a period of time. And typically you can have a reserved instance either through a 1 or 3 year type of model, and you can get discounts of up to 75% off of on-demand pricing. So reserved instances are basically discount coupon booklets. So each reserved instance gives you a discount per hour per instance on that time that you're basically reserving that instance over a period of time. And these are just simply, just to reiterate, is that these are simply, RIs are a financial construct that are basically layered on top of your infrastructure. So when you're choosing an instance, you can choose your instances to be reserved instances, on demand, or Spot. So we talk about Spot. What that really means is Spot is an excellent way for customers to save up to 90% on on-demand pricing on EC2 with no commitment or upfront pricing. So Spot instances are unused capacity in AWS regions. And the offer that's being offered here is at extreme discount. And the great thing you can think about for Spot are things like various stateless applications, fault tolerance, even flexible applications for things like big data, containerized workloads, CI/CD, and a wide variety of other things as well. It's worth noting that if you have an on-demand user and there basically requires instance type currently that's being used by Spot users, AWS is going to use, and it's going to terminate that instance within a 2-minute warning. So you want to think about it as if you have an application that doesn't require a specific runtime, or let's just say you need it to basically run, it doesn't matter whatever time of the day. Spot is a great way to give you that 90% savings on that workload. And there's a lot of different storage options for you to choose as well. And a lot of times when I work with customers is really kind of right-sizing that storage class, things such as EBS, which is elastic block storage, and things like simple storage service or S3. There's different security classes or different storage classes when it comes to this pillar. And we'll talk about this a little more in detail. So things like S3, so simple storage service, they offer different tiers of storage based on how frequently or infrequently you access your data. So it doesn't make sense to pay for the same price of data that you access every day as opposed to an archive that basically took 5 years ago, you probably won't ever access again. The great thing about being able to change your storage class within S3 is you're able to then start to reduce your total storage cost on data that you're storing for a longer period of time. So you can go from basically hot to warm to cold, and then be able to then archive that data into Glacier for even lower cost. And there's different mechanisms that you can basically ingest your data into S3. You can use things like Direct Connect, transfer acceleration, you can use Storage Gateway, or you could even use our Snowball family to be able to ingest large amount of data into S3. And things like EBS, you can even drive the cost down further with EBS, when we'll get into that a little bit more in detail, but you can actually change the storage class for your EBS or elastic block storages that are attached to your instances. We talk about some mechanisms for cost optimization. This tends to basically kind of really be a thing where we talk with customers about what are the different mechanisms, what are the processes, and what are some of the tools that we can help complement or basically use for those other pillars. And we talk about being able to use some mechanisms. So we talk about things like being able to define and force tagging, so that way you can appropriately monitor and categorize all your resources, define your metrics and KPIs so that way you can track all what your success looks like in your cost optimization journey. And then you really can enable teams to architect with cost efficiency in mind. And this is really what we want to drive to, is really helping customers understand is that they really want to architect for cost, not only just for cost, but also performance, reliability. But the biggest thing here tends to be about operating or architecting with keeping costs in mind. So a typical customer journey, when we talk about this, is we look at these pillars and we kind of see them across the spectrum here, is that there's going to be some environments or some applications that are going to be basically architected from a design perspective, where we may start to say, all right, so we want to increase elasticity, so we want to use auto-scaling. We want to use something like Lambda, which is serverless, and it simply allows you to run code without using unused or idle EC2 capacity. And that as you start to implement, you start to use things like RDS or relational databases. And then as you start to grow and basically as you spend more time in the cloud, is that then you can start getting into, as I grow, I want to start to be able to then start to optimize, allowing me more savings that will incur and that will have less remediation for me to do in later projects. So the goal here is to get to a point at which you can then start to look at your environment, and then you can really start to do some cost optimizations and start to really drive the cost down even further. So you may ask, so how do I get really started on this journey? Here are some questions that you can basically ask yourself as you proceed to the journey, such as how many instances could I right size? What benefits could I get from using reserved instances? How many instances need to be running 24/7? And then how many instances are going to be configured for auto scaling? So we want to really help our customers through their journey by helping them drive costs down. And then these are some great questions that you can ask yourself is when you work with your solutions architect, or even looking at our WellArchitected reviews, is that you can then start to look at how I can drive these costs down further. So I want to talk about a couple of different tools that are available to you in the console that allows you to start to look at right sizing and giving me that cost visibility that I haven't really been able to get from an on-premise environment, or I was really lacking. So another tool that we could look at is a tool called Trusted Advisor. And this is really a great tool that a lot of customers look at, and they really are able to gain some real insights into it. And what it really allows you to do is it really looks at your environment across the spectrum, and you're able to really start to identify things like low utilization, idle load balancers, EC2 RDS instances. You can even look at underutilized EBS volumes. And the great thing is about this is that it allows you to really get some insights. And I'm going to show you an example. So here's just a quick snippet from my dashboard, and it was able to show me that I was able to start looking at my Trusted Advisor, and right off the top, I could save $257. Now, some customers, this will basically vary upon how many resources you're basically currently utilizing. But I've seen some customers where they look at the Trusted Advisor, under that first pillar, they see cost optimization, they could start to see immediate savings into the hundreds or thousands of dollars. So this is a really big benefit for them to start looking at. Another great thing with Trusted Advisor is that not only does it tell me how much money I could save, it also starts to look at how my utilization is trending over a period of time. And if I have low utilization on EC2 instances, it makes those recommendations for me. So that way it tells me, hey, Trusted Advisor is almost kind of like your built-in cloud concierge, where it's really looking at your environment and really starting to kind of right size what you have and how you can save even more money. Another great thing about Trusted Advisor is that you now can start to deep dive in with what we call Cost Explorer. And Cost Explorer is a way for you to get real insights into what you're spending. And here in this example is that I'm looking at a spend trajectory over a period of time. And this starts to allow me the insights that I can now use to be able to drive business decisions, such as, we have certain environments or certain accounts that are trending upwards or trending downwards. But the benefit here is that I can now start to see this in real time, and I can now start to really forecast where I'm basically trending and how I'm going to be trending over the next couple of months. Another thing that you can do is when you're starting to set up your account, or when your existing account, is another feature you can use is you can use what we call an AWS budget. And AWS budget simply gives you the ability to set custom budgets that alert you when your cost usage or usage exceeds your budgeted amount. So let's say, for example, I wanted to set a budget for my specific environments, maybe set for production, development, or QA, is that I can set a dollar amount, either basically a dollar amount or even a resource or reservation utilization, or even coverage targets that allow me to basically set alerts and receive alerts when that utilization drops or it basically increases on the thresholds that I've defined. Another great way of looking at it is just simply making sure that we can put a budget around certain environments to say, if you're trending upwards, make sure you alert me. Another way I can start to look at this data is just simply pull a usage report. So another great thing about the budget is that I can set a budget on account or basically resources. And then how do I know exactly what things are costing me? Pull a cost and usage report. Great thing about this is that you can basically download this from your account. You can look to see what things are costing you, and then you can then basically use this to drive real insights. And we tend to basically being able to download this data directly from the dashboard, so we can really start to see some real insights. But another cool feature is that you can then start to use an analytics tool. So let's just say I don't want to use Excel. I want to use a dashboard analytics for real visual insights or being able to get some real data. Another way to look at it is I can basically pump some of this data and then use a tool called QuickSight. And QuickSight can give me that real rich analytics type of dashboard look and feel that I'm used to getting with other different type of BI tools. And QuickSight is a service that's native to AWS. And allows me to start really being able to start to pull and ingest that data so I can look at my trajectory and spend over a period of time. So as a customer or basically as an AWS user, what would be the next steps? Next steps would be is to engage your AWS account team, engage your AWS solutions architect, understand or even talk to your account manager about consider using savings plan. Savings plan is just a flexible pricing model that provides additional savings of up to 72% on your AWS compute usage. And this is a it's a pricing model that basically lowers prices on EC2 instances, regardless of your instance family. So definitely talk to your account manager, work with your solutions architect to basically have those cost optimization conversations and deep dives that really can help customers start saving additional money. And with that, that's all I got.
All right. Well, that was great. I really appreciate that, Steve.
Absolutely.
I know that in today's world, everyone's got lots of interest in moving to the cloud. And I think we got some really good insights in how do you do that in the most cost-effective way. I think just in general, make sure you go to angelbeat.com for the latest information. We've got a wealth of insights from Steve, many of his colleagues at AWS on a range of subjects. You can also look at our AngelBeat social media platform, #AngelBeat, to get the latest updates. We're excited about our AWS Virtual Summit on April 28th. Almost, I call it not reinvent, but mini invent. We're going to cover some of the same items. Steve, is there anything else you want to add?
Just that these things are out there and available for customers to take advantage of. We want to help empower customers to continue in this type of environment that we're working in to help drive those costs down. So my recommendation is to get out there, look at your trusted advisor dashboard and start saving.
And I think my final thought is we're all grappling with this overhaul in our personal and professional lives. We encourage everyone to take advantage of all this digital learning. And even though it's different and you wonder, well, how can I really go from on-prem to the cloud when I'm still working at home? There's a wealth of technical resources within AWS to make that happen. There's a wealth of analytical planning tools to help you understand the financial savings. And in many ways, I just encourage everyone to look at this in some small way as a positive instance for forcing all of us to really adopt new technology paradigms and computing platforms even much faster than we even thought were possible just a few months ago. And in that way, I think you'll find that when, God willing, the scientists come up with a cure for COVID-19, you'll have not only made your organization more flexible, helped it pursue digital transformation, you'll have also made yourself a much more valuable employee by showing how much you could do during these challenging times. And that's my final personal thoughts. So without any further ado, again, I'd like to thank Steve. I'm going to end the webinar, and I wish everyone the best and look forward to seeing you during future online programs and hopefully in person in the very near future. Thanks again, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you.